There was a wonderful moment. I think I messaged you straight away. I was like, oh, look, you've just gone back inside. And Sophie just sort of put an arm on her shoulder. And it was a really almost imperceptible moment, but one I think that really spoke volumes.
Your relatives are telling you to move out. You can't afford it. It's a bit stubborn.
He's got nothing else. I mean, he's got no public life, no public role, and he's clearly devoted to this home, and he likes being there. If he can make it work, then he's gonna try.
I'm quite annoyed because I've heard that I won't be able to read her diaries.
We won't be able to sort of rummage through them ourselves. Yeah. I would very much doubt they'll be published. But what will happen, I would expect in the next year or two, the king to appoint an official biographer.
Hi everyone, and welcome to a new and unusually early episode of a Right Royal podcast with me, Andrea.
And me, Emmy.
We have so much to talk about, don't we?
Yes, we just couldn't stay away for that long. There is too much to tell you guys.
This weekend was a big one for the royal family as they took part in remembrance events. Sadly, no Queen Camilla, but we did have 2 back-to-back appearances from the Princess of Wales.
We have so much more to cover. William's headline-grabbing South Africa visit for Earthshot, a big TV moment for Queen Camilla, the King's birthday plans.
And we're bringing not 1, but 2 guests this week. Our colleague Danielle Stacey, who is freshly back from Cape Town, and a good friend of the podcast, Robert Hardman, who has plenty of fascinating royal nuggets from an updated edition of his best-selling book, King Charles III, New King, New Court, Inside Story.
But before we get to them, let's welcome our resident expert, Emily Nash.
Welcome! Welcome!
Hi, Emily.
Hi, ladies. How are you doing?
Good. So nice to have you again. Now, you have a very busy life, work life actually, and you're fresh from Remembrance Sunday.
I am. Well, I'm not sure about fresh, but yes. It certainly was very fresh standing on Whitehall for a few hours yesterday morning. Yeah, I mean, what a fantastic experience.
How was it? How was it seeing Kate back?
Obviously, that was a huge focus of the day, and it was just lovely to see her in person again for the first time in a while. Obviously, she has done a few very low-key engagements. She had the visit to Southport and the meeting with Liz Hatton at Windsor. Remembrance, the Festival of Remembrance on Saturday night was a big moment for her, up in the royal box with the rest of the royal family for that. But seeing her out in a public place like that, overseeing a ceremony that the royals have taken part in for more than a century, just felt right. It would have been very sad for her not to have been there. And I know it's something that she was very keen to do if she was able to. So, she made it clear in her last message that she would, be taking things day by day and but hoping to return to events. And this was right up there as the key event she wanted to attend.
We always knew that Sunday would be happening, or also we thought, but Saturday was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, look, it's never really delivered with any fanfare. And it's interesting, the royal family is hugely respectful of remembrance, rightly so. So you won't see any press releases going out about anything else over that sort of 4-day period, really, leading into Remembrance Sunday. So it begins usually with a visit to the Fields and Trust display at Westminster Abbey, which is this lovely sea of crosses and poppies left by the families of the fallen. And then it goes on into the weekend, and the royal family tends to all appear at the Royal Albert Hall for the Festival of Remembrance, and then into the sort of set piece, if you like, at the Senotaph. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've got 10,000 veterans making their way down Whitehall. It's an incredibly moving event anyway. I mean, certainly I sort of caught my breath at one point yesterday when I spotted some of the D-Day veterans that I'd met down in Portsmouth earlier in the summer. And when you think about their life experience, it puts everything into context, doesn't it? But all that aside, we know how difficult a year this has been for the royal family. To watch the king laying his wreath, as he has done for so many years, as his mother did before him, and also to see Kate back there in the heart of it, really, was really reassuring.
She looked very affected by it, I thought. She looked very emotional.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we all take a moment, don't we, to pause and I guess reflect on how lucky we are that, we're living in a country where thankfully there's, war on our shores for a very long time. But she had family members who served, and she's married into a very military family. And, she has Colonel-in-Chief roles now within the armed forces. So it's something that is very important to her.
Did she think it was a comfort to her to have the Duchess of Edinburgh there with her? Because they seem like good pals. They seem like they're the royal besties.
Yeah, look, I think that was really important. And obviously, Queen Camilla wasn't able to be there. For anyone who's not heard, she has been recovering from a chest infection, possibly picked up, during the course of her travelling. And it's taken a little bit longer, I think, than they'd hoped for her to feel well enough. That being said, it's not an event that you want to do if you're not feeling great, because you don't want to be coughing or spluttering during a 2-minute silence.
But also, when they said that she wasn't going and, she didn't want to, kind of get anyone sick, it's, Charles is still undergoing treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Princess of Wales, although we know she's completed her chemotherapy, no one wants to see them getting unwell unnecessarily. So there is that as a factor. But then we had the Duchess of Edinburgh stepping up as well, and she would always have been on those balconies. Yeah. But I think it was very touching to see the way that she and Kate were interacting. It's something they've both done many times before, but still stepping out there, especially for Kate, having had the year that she's had, knowing that there's such a focus on her, having someone in her corner by her side, who she has that relationship with, will have been hugely valuable. And, Sophie has sort of been always a few years ahead of Kate in terms of her experience of life in the royal family. And it's definitely someone she can learn from and share confidences with, I suppose. So there was a wonderful moment. I think I messaged you straight away. I was like, oh, look, you've just gone back inside. And Sophie just sort of put an arm on her shoulder. It was a really almost imperceptible moment, but one I think that really spoke volumes.
Something similar happened for the Festival of Remembrance on Saturday, where William did the same thing for his wife, just really attentive, which was before it would have been very strange to see that. We haven't seen that very often, but now it's, it makes sense. They were getting out of the car, they were going into the Royal Albert Hall, and he was just really ushering her in, and it's really lovely to see.
Well, I have to say, I slightly disagree, because I feel like I've seen him do that lots of times, but maybe it's more when they're on engagements together and there is just a sort of natural movement, tactile movement. But I know what you mean. There was an element of feeling like there's a bit of a protective arm going around her at the moment, and rightly so.
Yeah.
So Camilla was missing from the weekend, but she's not missing in her upcoming documentary.
No.
That was my segue.
I love what you've done there, Emmy. No, this is great for viewers tuning in today who are in the UK. They may have watched overnight the Queen's new documentary, Behind Closed Doors. And I was lucky enough to go to a preview at Buckingham Palace of this documentary a couple of weeks ago. It really sort of took my breath away. It's incredibly powerful. You've got the Queen talking about a topic which she says in her own words was incredibly taboo when she was a young woman. It actually showed these wonderful images of her in the sort of 50s and 60s, looking very glamorous, I must say, but talking about how attitudes to women have changed since then and how they are now. But really what this does is it highlights the stories of a sort of a range of women. And what is most shocking is the statistics that come through in this. And the Queen says she felt very strongly that something had to be done when the figures were getting close to 2 women murdered a week in the UK. And I think the statistic, certainly from Refuge, is that 1 in 4 women in the UK will experience domestic violence during their lifetime, which is really quite stark. It's not just women. We know it affects a lot of men too. But what you hear from in the documentary are some of the people that the Queen has met along the way who are very bravely sharing their stories. And it really makes you realise that it can happen to anyone. One of them is a very senior police officer who didn't feel able to share her experience. But since doing so, it has prompted, many dozens of her colleagues to come forward.
Oh, wow.
And I think what this is doing in the way that William's Homewood's documentary has done is it's really trying to take away some of the stigma around this. And I just can't think of another year where the royals have so directly been putting these big social issues onto primetime TV, and in a way that is unimaginable. Even sort of 5 or 6 years ago, you can't imagine. And obviously the late Queen's role was different to the current Queen's role. You know, she's consort to King Charles. But really it feels like a different era we're in now, where they're much more open emotionally. They are much more willing to put a spotlight on really quite difficult to discuss topics.
Yeah.
I would love to hear, you know, when you guys get a chance to watch it, what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching it. Did you get a bit of an advanced
So
screening?
I did, yes. I was very lucky enough to be invited to Buckingham Palace to watch it.
Wow.
And many of the women who appear in it were also there.
Oh, wow.
Gosh,
And
amazing.
it was really quite humbling, I guess, to be around these incredibly brave people and some of the people who are campaigning on their behalf and on behalf of the women who have died. You know, that up to 3 women a week are committing suicide as well because of this. When you hear these figures, it's truly shocking. And I think that the more this becomes part of the normal conversation, the more people will recognise the symptoms and hopefully be able to seek help. And as Camilla says herself, you know, she's going to carry on doing this for as long as she's able.
Good.
It's like a lifelong commitment. Yeah. And I mean, give it a watch.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
And that is, by the time that this is finished recording and it out, it will be available.
You can catch up on
ITVX.
ITVX. And just to say as well, it's made by a production company called Love Monday. It's female-led and it was filmed by an all-female crew. So there's a bit of an element of girl gang about it as well,
power.
which is really lovely.
Right. Well, shall we move on to our next guest, who's actually a lovely colleague, Danielle Stacey?
Let's get her in.
Danielle, welcome to the podcast and welcome back. How was Cape Town?
It was absolutely incredible. What an amazing experience. I've never been to Cape Town, never been to Africa, the continent in general. So what better way to explore it than with Prince William?
Oh, are you
What
recovered?
a way of doing it.
Yes, definitely. Am I still tired? Do I know what day it is?
Probably no.
That's probably questionable.
So tell us a bit. It was your first time, obviously, following, you know, William to something so important. What was it like the first few days or settling in the first day?
Yeah, it's always, I think, having done sort of, you know, when they do away days, as we call it, to cities, and they might have several engagements in one day and they might have a walkabout, but this is on another level. It's very intense, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that, you know, you've got a lot going on. You're filing on buses in between. Your colleagues are feeding you Haribo. I won't name names. It's just, you know, you've got your head down constantly. Obviously, I was speaking, you know, communicating with you guys back in the UK about everything that was coming up. So it's just another level, but it's very fun, isn't it? Obviously, you have.
It's fun. I know. I'm looking at you with this great pride.
Yeah. Being on the TV and film team, I'm obviously not on the day-to-day royal thing, but it all sounded very calm and very not stressful.
Collected.
What I gathered in the office.
Much like a duck, you know, like kind of calm on the surface and just like paddling underneath.
Yeah.
And I was also the reporter on the first job with William, so it felt like, you know, quite a big pressure.
Big moment.
So what did you have to do for that? What did that
Let's not forget, though, that before this engagement, there was all this kind of drama with the dispatches.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into this with Robert in a moment, but it's fair to say there was a lot of eyeballs on.
Yeah.
Yes, and a lot of, I suppose, when he first arrived, and, you know, it's not like with a lot of royal tours, you might see them step off the plane, but this is something different. It's not a state visit. He's there to represent his passion project, which is the Earthshot Prize. And actually, I think, you know, it's much more than a passion project. He's taken it to 4 countries so far. There's plans for more and different continents over the next, we're 4 years into it now, so the next 6 years. So I guess, you know, there was a lot of focus on him anyway, because it was the first major trip since Kate completed her chemotherapy.
Yeah. And there's so much hanging on it for him as well, you know, because it's his first big trip, as you say, after what he has described in his own words as a brutal year. And we'll get into that in a moment. But what was he like? How did he come across to you?
Well, no,
seeing him up
does the
close.
beard look good in person?
It does. we're very focused
Is
on
he?
the beard.
Yes,
Here at the back.
Does he
Please,
look
he's-
taller? Does he look slimmer? Because obviously when you see
taller.
someone...
I mean, how's he growing?
Well, I know, but like when you see someone in photos and then you see
Oh,
them in
you
real
see them
life,
in
you're
real
like,
life.
what?
How tall is he?
Yeah,
Danielle?
I think both William and Kate are quite tall, actually. Just I think that shows on the pictures, doesn't it? You're like, he was in a room full of 120 young environmentalists who were coming up with solutions to solve the climate crisis, and he was very relaxed. There was no sort of fanfare when he arrived. It was like, oh, he's here. And he went from table to table, really engaged, didn't kind of do much of the talking, left the floor open to each individual who was, describing their idea. And honestly, the ideas that some of them came up with, I'm like, you're so young.
Yeah.
How do you think of these things? But what was really lovely at the end was that he stood up on stage and he gave this off-the-cuff speech in which he said, "You're going to change the world."
Oh.
It was very inspiring. You do come away from Earthshot events feeling really hopeful for the future, especially at a time when the world is in a real place of uncertainty.
And then you land back in the UK and...
and the grey skies.
Yes, and very cold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I do think that while Earthshot is all about the finalists, and he had a lot of time with them. He met with them in the botanical gardens the morning of the awards, and obviously I think he's met various innovators in the lead up to it. But it was also very much about the next generation. Just down from the engagements that he did on the first day, but also, the talent that was invited to perform, the crowd that was there. I think he made a comment about how they were the grown-ups down the front, but the party was at the back with the youngsters. And it was sitting in there. You could hear the noise from the back of the Ecodome, when Uncle Waffles was on stage. And
Uncle Waffles?
Yes.
I must have missed that one.
Oh, Andrea, you're not down with the kids.
No,
Who's
no.
Uncle Waffles?
A very well-known DJ in South Africa.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very excited.
Confusingly, not on Uncle.
I
at
just
all.
thought it was Gen Z.
A young
Something
woman.
Gen Z that had
Yeah,
passed
yeah,
me by.
yeah.
Yeah.
But no, very excited. And I think William also spoke about feeling emotional when Lebo M performed the opening track, which obviously he's known for Circle of Life from the Lion King soundtrack. And I must admit, I did have a little, like, not a blub, but like I did have tears coming down. I think it's, a mix of childhood nostalgia.
Yeah.
Also, it's just very moving. It's just a very moving, uplifting song. And obviously they pre-recorded it at the top of Table Mountain. Very uplifting.
Wow.
Very moving. I've had really bad FOMO anyway all week. But it's
Mainly because of the sun.
Doubling by the moment, yeah. I just think, there was so much going on anyway. And then we had this really headline-grabbing interview. Tell us a little bit about that, because one thing I've observed over the years with the Prince of Wales is that he does sometimes give these fantastic nuggets of information, but it all depends on the mood music, how things are going at the time. But we saw it at the Earthshot ceremony last year in Singapore. He did speak to the media, and he's done it again. And it's really important, isn't it, when he's on a solo trip, I think, because it's a way of really sending the message home. But he was very personal, wasn't he?
He was, and I think it is the first time that we've heard from the Prince about how the year has been for him and how it's taken its toll on him. We've heard from the Princess very personally 2 or 3 times now. And he remarked that he did look relaxed. He was very relaxed on the trip. And I think he was very casually dressed for most of it in obviously sustainable clothing. We can come back to that. But he did. He probably looked more relaxed than we'd seen him in ages. But obviously he admitted in the interview, I haven't been feeling relaxed. It has been the most brutal, hardest year of my life. And understandably so. With your wife and your father going through cancer treatment.
Yeah.
But it just brings it back to, he is a member of the royal family. One day he's going to be king. But at the end of the day, they're human beings. And it's a disease, unfortunately, that, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
What is it with statements in South Africa? Because
What do you mean?
oh well,
this was an interview, so it's a bit
Well,
different.
it's
I know what
different.
you're thinking
of course, I'm going back to the Harry and Meghan.
the last visit. To
Yeah, the
South
last
Africa.
visit when they opened up, and obviously they gave, they were candid about their experience.
Yes.
Now we've had
When are they not, really?
this incredible interview with William, which I loved, especially, I loved his confession that Charlotte was in tears when he left his beard, to grow, and he actually had to shave it off because of her. And then he was like, actually, no, wait, let me grow it back and we can deal with it.
We all know that sometimes you have to remind yourself with young children.
I know.
You're in charge, actually.
I know, exactly, yes. But I love that because it's such a parent thing to do. You don't upset them and then you're like, actually, wait, we can figure this out.
My kids hated my beard as well.
I've loved, what did you make of it?
I just thought it was brilliant. I was really...
Wait, we're still talking about the beard?
What, my beard? No, look, so this is what's known as a brush past, I suppose, if you're a journalist, and it happens with politicians, doesn't it? They'll be leaving an event and sometimes they might stop and say something on camera, and it's very rare for it to happen with members of the royal family, but it does very occasionally. There was a sort of brush past very early on in this year after the King's cancer diagnosis, when Prince William was going into that London Air Ambulance event with Tom Cruise, and someone was able to shout out a question about how he was, and it was very sort of brief, but this was really a lot more than I think most people were anticipating. And what's interesting to me is how much the royal family are leaning into being a lot more open emotionally this year.
What did he say back then? Sorry.
Oh, I think he said thank you, because he was asked how the king was and the princess, and he said, I think if I remember rightly, now you caught me out.
Yeah.
It was
like a pub
something.
quiz.
Yeah, it's like it's testing my memory, but it was something along the lines of that we're really touched by all the support. So it was a lovely response, but it went nowhere near as far as this one did. I think it's very clever because Earthshot was happening at a time when there were huge events going on in the world, mentioning no elections in particular. And I'm not saying in any way that it was done with this in mind, but it definitely focused attention. I mean, it was front page all over the place.
I mean, I think we said this in a podcast the other week, that because obviously we knew it was going to coincide with the election. And I think I might have said he's going to need to do something really headline grabby.
Well, maybe he listened.
Yeah. Oh my God, I will.
I'm telling you, they listen.
Love the beard. Ignore your daughter.
I think it had the personal touch to it. He also spoke a lot about Earthshot, but he also spoke about his and Kate's role in the future and how he wanted to do royal with a smaller R. It's the impact that they have, and that's what they're focusing on. And it has long been said that the late Queen had hundreds and hundreds of patronages, but I guess for William and Kate, they're concentrating more on quality over quantity, if I'm right in saying that.
I think the word they always like to use is impact, isn't it? So they want to see, with the focus, the time that they have and the energy they have on sort of bringing measurable impact. And we talked about it with Homewards, didn't we? And Earthshot is another case in point, because each year, these winners are bringing new solutions to the table. They're scaling up. And so by the end of 10 years, really, there's going to be a lot to show for it. Whereas traditionally, members of the royal family might go along, unveil a plaque, which is lovely, for everyone who visits that building over the next 50 years. But really, this is about making a wider impact. And what's really great about Earthshot is this global appeal. The fact that ceremony, the award ceremony, was broadcast to the entire African continent, the reach it has is really quite special. So I want to know more about what the atmosphere was like, though, in that ceremony, because it was the biggest one they've ever held, 2,000 guests in the audience.
It was a real party atmosphere. So in the sort of entrance leading up to the green carpet, there were performers and dancers from Cape Carnival, and it's just incredible. I wanted to stay outside, actually. I was like, don't worry about the green carpet. I'll stay outside here with the dancers. Just a very high energy green carpet, lots of noise and lots of colour, and everyone wearing their sustainable outfits, because obviously most of the guests, it's been an on-running theme, I guess, over the last 4 years. But I mean, people really went to town with it, including the Prince in his
Charity shop find.
Yes, I would love to know if anyone
We
has
want
seen...
to know the charity shop.
Yes, if anyone's seen...
Have you
William
taken delivery?
of a checked Prince of Wales blazer, and obviously I think the blazer that he wore on the last day as well.
He bought them from charity shops.
A locally sourced charity shop in London. So let's start ringing around.
Yeah. Can you imagine the person like, oh
Yeah.
my God, I'm pretty sure I took that to the charity shop like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Could you imagine?
We have to.
Did
we
it
have
belong
to
to
track
your
them
dad?
down.
Oh, hello.
Dad, I told you it was a cool one.
Like, internet, do your thing.
Should have kept it.
Yeah.
And the purified shoes, which are completely biodegradable, plastic free. So basically, they can be ground down and replanted.
Oh, wow.
It's so cool. And to have a member of the royal family wearing these puts them on the map, doesn't it? I think you spoke to the shoemaker.
Mary Allen from Nature Fibre Welding. And we'd said, did you know that the prince is wearing your shoes? And she was so surprised.
Really?
She didn't know. I believe she said that she knew that he'd like sourced a pair, that she had no idea that
He was gonna wear them.
he was going to wear them at the Earthshot Awards. So she looked genuinely surprised, actually.
Wow, I love that.
I just thought it was. I know he's worn the Alexander McQueen blazer in the past, and he's looked very, it's very kind of like a James Bond vibe with his tux and stuff.
There was a lot of debate about his look.
I know, but
They said it was lots of royal fans said it was too casual for such, a ceremony like Earthshot. But styles evolve.
I think so. And also, if you're there, you've got a really young audience, as you say, and they really are appealing, because they've got influencers there. They've got people with massive digital followings, haven't they, taking part in these things. You don't want to look like the stuffy old guy.
Yeah.
No.
And it's much more approachable. He was at the first engagement with the youngsters, and it's an open collar shirt, and there's no ties, and it's much more approachable, isn't it?
Mm.
Oh, I've loved our chat.
It sounds like you had an
When's your next
amazing
royal
time.
outing?
Yeah, very jealous.
Can I have some more sleep first?
More sleep before I go off to the next sunny destination.
Thanks for joining us today,
Thank
Danielle.
you.
Shall we welcome our next guest?
I think we should. We are welcoming back friend of the podcast, Robert Hardman, who has just released an updated version of his biography, King Charles III, New King, New Court, The Inside Story. Welcome to the show, Robert. First time seeing you here in person, although we've spoken on many occasions.
We have.
And I saw you yesterday.
Yeah, there we were at the Senotaph. We're both busy people at the moment.
Certainly, yes. I mean, how did you find that yesterday?
I thought the Senotaph. I always find it, because without saying, it's very moving. But it's the timelessness of it. I mean, I can't remember how many times I've covered that event. I bet you've been there several times too, and it's always the same. But it doesn't matter. It never gets boring. There's always both on the sort of formal side of it, on the where you've got the royal family there, the official bit, the only moment where you get all the royal family, all the party leaders, all the diplomatic corps, all the leaders of all the armed forces, all in one place, and nobody says a word. The only person who speaks is the Bishop of London, and you have that incredibly solemn moment, and then all the VIPs sort of clear off, and then on come 10,000 veterans, and it's all wonderfully ramshackle. Everyone's marching out of time. The band are playing all the old favourite songs. It's a long way to Tipperary, this sort of thing. And you see these wonderful old soldiers and men and women now, doing their best. Very proud to be there. Very important to them to be there. And I just think it's a wonderful day. It's so important that we keep giving it the projection I think it deserves.
I mean, I found it, going back to those old songs, it made me think of my grandparents straight away. It's always really,
they've
really
always been in
touching.
England and ruled Britannia and all that stuff.
Yeah. It was a big moment for the Royals, obviously, as well, after the year that they have been through. What do you think it meant to have, obviously, the King there performing his duty, but the Princess of Wales watching from overhead?
No, I think it meant everything for them to be there in force. I mean, it was a great pity that Queen Camilla couldn't be there. I think everybody understood that. But I think after the year that the King and the Princess have had, that was a very important moment for them both to be back at sort of centre stage, literally. And it's sort of a reminder, that the monarchy belongs at the heart of our national life. And I think the way that as I said, no one says anything. I mean, everyone just sort of does what they always do. But there was just this added poignancy, I think, to it this year. And actually, when I was writing about it, I thought, I wonder when the king laid his first wreath. And I went back through the records, and it was actually back in 1972. He was
Wow.
a new young naval officer just being commissioned. So that's 52 years ago.
So how old was he then?
He
What's
was
the maths
he was
of that?
23.
23.
He
I was
was
just
23-year-old.
thinking when George was going to do it.
And he's, and back then he was in a Royal Navy uniform. Back then he was a sub-lieutenant, and now he's an admiral of the fleet. So, but it's still a Navy uniform. He's still in the same spot, doing the same thing, because it's that kind of event. It's never out of date. It's remembrance. It's what we do.
I mean, there was one moment actually as he stepped back from placing his wreath that really reminded me of the late Queen. It's just that sort of pause, and then actually taking his care, because it's not easy to walk backwards downstairs.
Oh, I know. You just watch. I used to watch the late Queen. You think she's in her 90s, and she's reversing down the steps.
Yeah.
Wait, they have to walk backwards downstairs?
Yeah, you lay your
and
wreath.
everyone watching them?
The world watching.
There's no way. There's no way that's doable.
There's so much scope for it to go horribly wrong. That's why it's so beautifully
Yeah.
carried out every year.
Yeah.
Look, it was a sombre day.
It was.
I want to segue, not very elegantly, from that to another sombre revelation in your book, which is the change in funeral arrangements for the royal family. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, I mean, it might seem a sort of insensitive subject, but the fact is that as the funeral of the late Queen showed, these are immensely important occasions. Not just self-evidently it's a funeral, but for the sort of standing of the monarchy and of the nation. People expect these things to be done perfectly and beautifully. As indeed in the case of the late Queen it was. But to do that, you've got to make plans. And I did talk to people while I was writing my book. They said, look, we do have to plan these things. The principals involved have no great desire to get too closely involved. But I mean, the fact is, anything that's going to involve thousands of troops, a large part of the police and all the other services and all the broadcasters and media, you've got to have a few plans. So there is always a plan in hand. I mean, with Elizabeth II, planning began in earnest for her farewell a good 20 years earlier with what was known as Operation London Bridge. That was the title that the previous Duke of Norfolk gave to the funeral plans for the monarch. With other funeral plans for other members of the family given different bridge designations, so that the Queen Mother, for example, was Operation Tay Bridge, and the Prince of Wales was Operation Menai Bridge. The Menai Bridge being the bridge between Anglesey and Wales, and so that process has resumed as one might expect. But it was quite interesting to discover that actually the designation for the monarch remains Operation London Bridge, and for the Prince of Wales is Operation Menai Bridge still, whereas previously for Prince William it was Operation Clare Bridge, because Clare Bridge is a famous bridge in Cambridge, and he was the Duke of Cambridge. So I mean, these are just these are minor points. These are kind of, if you like, I mean, these are sort of royal sort of incidentals, if you like. But
we love a royal incidental.
People are interested about this stuff.
And I think, and again, and you say in the book that Menai is designated for all of William's immediate family.
Yeah, that would be the plan. Is that within each family you have you'd have sort of Menai 1, Menai 2, Menai 3. I mean, let's not even think about it.
No, of course.
But things are getting a bit morose.
Well, no, actually, they going back through the files when I was writing a previous book, there was a hefty file I discovered in one of the archives on royal funeral planning, and they all taking a very keen interest in it. Nobody took a keener interest than Lord Mountbatten. Actually, he was constantly revising his plans. It almost became a joke. I found a memo from one of his team to Downing Street, and someone had scribbled on it, "Oh no, Lord Mountbatten's revising his funeral plan again. Now he wants the royal train." And he got the Royal Train actually when the time came. But these are things you do. Everyone always says, when it comes to pageantry and these great events, people say, oh well, nobody does it like the armed forces. Nobody does it like Britain. Well, if you're going to get it right, you've got to plan it.
How involved are the royals with that? Because I think if it was me, I'd just be like, you guys do it. I just want to know.
I think it's a bit like that. I don't think they want to know particularly. I mean, they certainly, like most people, I think, would sort of certainly have a view on what sort of music, what sort of hymns, that sort of thing. I know that the late Queen Mother took a great interest in her funeral would often be rehearsed. Which she didn't mind at all. She just wanted to know which horses had behaved and which hadn't.
Really? That's so interesting.
And one thing as well that you say, and I think we should mention this because it offsets any funeral chat, is that there was no sudden call-up, was there, to revise any of these plans this year?
No.
Despite everything that's happened.
If anything were to happen, the first person who gets called is the Earl Marshal, who's the sort of hereditary organiser of state occasions. That is the Duke of Norfolk. The Duke of Norfolk was the man in charge of the late Queen's funeral. He was the man in charge of the coronation. If there were any cause for concern, someone would put a call into Eddie Norfolk, as he's known. And Eddie Norfolk did not receive it all through this year, all the dark days earlier this year. Eddie Norfolk did not get a call. So from that, we can extrapolate that
he's had a good year.
News. Yeah,
very, very promising. Yeah.
But that is, I mean, going back to our last conversation, I think when you joined us earlier in the year to announce the release of the book, things were in a very different place to where we are now. And it feels like there's a light at the end of the tunnel for many reasons. One of the things that you touch on in great detail is the relationship between the King and Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. I know we talked about this the other day, but there is a sense, isn't there, that there is a willingness to reconcile, probably on the King's part, when the time is right. I mean, tell us a little bit more about what you found out.
Well, that's a very good point, Emily. I mean, I learned while writing this, and all the way through writing the updated edition. That's the thing with sort of, if you call what I call sort of live biography, things keep changing, and the dynamic between Prince Harry and his father and the palace, was sort of work in progress as it always has been, and people kept saying, well, why, particularly back in May when yes, we know Prince Harry jumped on a plane, came over to see his father when the cancer diagnosis was announced in February. Then he came back again in May to do stuff with his Invictus Games. And you had both of them in London at the same time doing stuff. And people were saying, well, why can't they talk? Why can't they get together? And the reasons are complex, but they're interesting. I mean, the first one is simply stress levels. People around the King know that if he does sit down with Harry's got an enormous amount he wants to unpack. A lot he wants to talk about and get off his chest. And that kind of a conversation, that's going to be a potentially heated one at times. And the view is just now's not the time with the King. He's the poor guy's trying to get through his cancer treatment. So that was one reason. Another reason was that any discussion between the King and Harry has also got to involve William. You can't have the King and his younger son having a sort of bilateral, some sort of agreement without Prince William having a say in it, because ultimately he's going to be taking charge one day, and that relationship is obviously a rather more complex one.
Do we think William's thawed at all, or
he's such a private kind of chap? You never know, but I sense not. I mean, again, you just have to look at the sort of signals when they appear. I mean, and an important one I think was back in August when we had the funeral of their uncle, Robert Fellows, Lord Fellows, former private secretary to the Queen. He was a great man. Everybody, the Windsors loved him, the Spencers loved him, and he was to William and Harry. He was their aunt's husband. He was their uncle by marriage, if you like, and they had great regard for him. So they were both there at the funeral, and those are the sort of moments when you might expect a bit of thawing. And by all accounts, it was a very private event, but by all accounts, there was no thaw, and that was August. So no, I think that there's just. There's an awful lot to to patch up. I mean, when you think back to what was in Harry's book Spare, there's a lot there that I think Prince William found very upsetting, and you don't just sort of push that stuff aside.
One of the things also in your book, which I enjoyed reading, by the way, the 3 new chapters are really good. You speak about the Queen, and if she had lived 1 more year, she would have told Prince Andrew to leave Royal Lodge. Do you really believe that would have been the case?
Yes, I do. The Queen was very practical. There's a sort of a kind of myth. I mean, there's probably got some truth to it, but I think it gets greatly exaggerated that Prince Andrew had some sort of special favoured son status, which has been perpetuated through things like the Crown. And it's often just alluded to in articles as though it's a sort of matter of fact, when, I mean, it's pure conjecture. I mean, the fact was, yes, she loved Andrew. They did have a sort of a very strong bond, but at the same time, she was very protective of him. And she could see that this whole Royal Lodge situation after his departure from public life was just not sustainable. I mean, and her view was that, this is ultimately, and she's been through this herself. She's been through situations where you're in the public firing line over something, and occasionally you have to move before things get worse. It happened way back in the early 90s when the monarchy was under a lot of attack for not paying taxes, and John Major, then Prime Minister, told the Queen, look, I'm prepared to defend your situation. You don't have to do this. You don't have to pay taxes. And the Queen said, look, I can see which way this is going. I know I don't have to, but I'm going to, because I think this is one of those things where you have to sort of take the hit, if you like. And I know this. I've discussed that with John Major. And so going back to Prince Andrew, the Queen could see, this situation is only going to get worse. The justification for the huge cost of Royal Lodge. It's okay if it's being lived in by a public figure, because if it's a public figure doing something in public life, then the quid pro quo is that the state sort of protects them. When you've got somebody who is very manifestly not part of public life because the public don't want to see him, who's effectively in a sort of internal exile, it's much harder to justify that expense. There's a perfectly viable alternative, and if it had come from HM Queen, then Prince Andrew would have had to live with it.
They seem to have kind of responded to your revelation, because there was a report yesterday saying that he has found the money.
Well, he claims the report was he claims he's found the money. That's in the book, actually. Yes, I saw those reports the weekend saying Prince Andrew claims he's found the money. I went, well, yeah, he has. As written in the book,
down the sofa.
That's that we don't know. But what we do know, we know that he says that there's money there, and that it now transpires. What we have learned since is that this money, these funds, have been checked out by the officials who have to do that. I mean, you can't just anything to do with sort of money in the rolls. It's got to be absolutely scrupulously clean. So whatever the source of funding is, it's been
it's legitimate.
It's been approved. But the question I suspect is not so much is it legit money. I mean, I would not hope and expect that it would be. It's more, how long can it last? What is going to sustain what is a pretty expensive lifestyle? Because, as I say in the book, because he hasn't, because he's refused to move, having been offered another place, and despite the king saying that I really think you should do this, he said, nope, I'm going to stay here. He's now lost his allowance, his living allowance. So he's now got the security costs, the maintenance costs, and all his living costs that were previously being met by his brother. So he's got a lot of bills to pay, and maybe there's some business activity going on, or former business activity. We don't know. But
I would really love to know. It's quite annoying, actually.
well, yeah. Well, one thing I would say is, I mean, with all of us, I mean, everyone wants to know everybody else's business, but I do think people, whether they're royal, whether Duke of York, whoever they are, they are entitled to their kind of, what they do with their money, if it's as long as it's sort of above board and everything. I mean, then you should be allowed to do, what you like with it. In his case, if he wants to spend millions paying for maintenance and security of a house that needs it, well, that's his call.
It feels a little sort of counterproductive, doesn't it, really, when it's your relatives are telling you to move out, you can't afford it. It's a bit stubborn, maybe.
Yeah, I suppose looking at it the other way, I mean, someone said to me the other day, well, he's got nothing else. I mean, he's got no public life. He's no public role, and he's clearly devoted to this home, and he likes being there. If he can make it work, then he's gonna try. But I think it really is a case of wait and see.
Whilst we're talking about money, do we think the royals need to be more transparent with their finances? Because we had this obviously conversation last week, just as Prince William was starting his South African, mini tour.
Yeah, for viewers and listeners, it was an investigation into the finances of the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, which fund the monarch and the Prince of Wales respectively. And we talked about this also briefly last week. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's that classic thing where complicated sort of ancient medieval parchment comes up against the sort of full glare of 21st century TV media scrutiny. So, since time immemorial, the monarch has been funded by this property portfolio called the Duchy of Lancaster that goes back to medieval times. And the heir to the throne has been funded by another property portfolio called the Duchy of Cornwall, which goes back to medieval times. And like all landed estates, like every pension fund in the country, like the Church of England, like pretty much every college, every ancient university, these institutions have these land holdings. They have property. What do you do with property? You rent it out, or you farm it, or whatever. You don't just sort of leave it vacant. And that's how you derive your source of income. So that's the way it's worked. What's happened in recent weeks is that various, the journalists at Dispatches and at the Sunday Times have been going through all the land registry details on all of these properties to establish who owns what and what gets rented out to whom, and have found that in some cases some of this property is being rented out to public bodies or charities or the armed forces, and there's a sort of therefore, well, how can the royal family justify doing this? Well, the simple reason is it's how the world goes round. I mean, a charity shop has to rent its premises off somebody. It has to pay its electricity bill. Now, you could argue, well, the royal family should just give it to them for free. Well, they could do that. They could do that for a year or two, at which point you'd totally distort the market. And after a while, that would be the end of the duchy. If there was an obligation that any kind of state tenant was somehow expected to get it gratis. I mean, I looked at some of the figures, and I mean, it's true. You could argue, well, why, for example, why there's a scout hut and that somewhere or other, I think it's in Norfolk or Somerset or somewhere, it's paying £6,000 for a scout hut, and of course if you put it in those sort of terms, it looks, oh my goodness,
a month.
What's the monarchy? No, it's over something like 21 years. It works out at about £20 a month. I mean, it's less than I don't know. It's less than what it would cost to rent our local village hall for an evening.
Right.
Okay. So I mean, actually, when you look at it in perspective, it's not really that dramatic. There was a lot of heat given to the fact that that there are the RNLI, the lifeboats, are paying rent to, I can't remember which duchy it is. I think it's the Duchy of Cornwall, and it was dressed up as it's thousands of pounds, but actually it turns out to be £100 a year each for a bit of waterside property. I mean, these are and also these are deals that the monarch or the Prince of Wales would have absolutely no idea what's going on. I mean, these are vast estates which are sort of doing all this all these different deals. I mean, there are legitimate question marks there. People will say, well, hang on, why is the Duchy of Lancaster involved in quotes mining? I don't think they're actually opening up coal mines, but I mean, what's going on is a sort of quarrying activity. The point is, all this stuff has to be done in full view of government auditors. I mean, there was actually a cabinet minister called the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden. He's been on the airwaves this week. I haven't heard anybody ask him. He's got, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is a sort of honorary title, which usually goes to a very senior cabinet minister, as to lots of other things. But in the mix, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster does have to have oversight of the Duchy's accounts and sign off on them. So, I mean, all these things are ultimately a matter for government. And if government decides, well, hang on, we're not putting up with this, or maybe the Duchy shouldn't be renting out this or that or doing whatever, then there are mechanisms there to stop it. But in the meantime, it makes great headlines, and we're sitting here talking about it.
Yes.
Now, it's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Of course it is.
I don't think it was the gotcha moment that they thought it might be. I didn't really see a huge furore
Because
over
I
it.
think it's a bit like when there were... Yeah, I mean, it's true. When you start getting down to the granular detail, and then you work out, well, how much does all this cost, and how does it work? Then you realise, well, it is kind of how the world goes round. I mean, we all, in some regard, we all pay for our use of whatever services. And as I say, I mean, if the royal family could be ordered to hand over all this to the state, well, fine. Then what?
I wish someone had given me a duchy.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going
You'll
wrong.
be a great Duchess.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Now, I want to move on to one of my favourite bits, which is the late Queen's last diary entry. I mean, I'm intrigued.
We're quite annoyed about this, aren't
I'm
we?
quite annoyed because I've heard that I won't be able to read her diaries for I don't know how many years. Will I be here? I don't know.
They're locked for 90 years.
Well, no,
You
but that
won't
was the
be
will. We
here.
were talking about the will. But I know the diaries might take ages until we see them, if we do.
No, I'm not sure we will see them. We won't be able to sort of rummage through them ourselves. I would very much doubt they'll be published. But what will happen is, in fairly short order, I would expect in the next year or two, the king to appoint an official biographer, because that's what each monarch appoints an official biographer to write the official life of the previous monarch. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened for a very long time. The last time was the death of George VI, and the Queen appointed John Wheeler Bennett back in the early 50s to write the life of her father. More recently, this happens, by the way, with monarchs and their consorts. So after the death of the Queen Mother, the late Queen appointed William Shawcross to be her official biographer, and it's fascinating. It's brilliant. If you haven't read Willie Shawcross's book on the Queen Mum, it's full of it's understandably a very big book, because she lived a very long life. But what happens is that official biographer then does have access to the diaries and the papers and the letters and all this sort of thing to put together this.
How many
this
years?
biography.
The Queen was like 90, was it 97?
96.
Yeah. And she reigned for 70 years. I mean, that would be the most. I don't know to what extent she may have kept a diary as a young girl, but certainly from the moment she became queen in 1952, she kept a diary, and who knows what's in it.
Robert, you'd be very good at that job.
You.
Would you
Oh,
be up
sweet of
for
you.
it?
Waiting for the call.
I mean, golly, I mean, never say never. I think there are some very, very eminent academics out there who would be very well suited to do this. But I mean, whoever gets it is going to have to spend. It's going to be years, because you don't just go through the Queen's papers. You've got to go through all the corresponding papers of all the politicians that she worked with. Well, I mean, in this country alone, the Queen worked with 15 prime ministers, from Churchill through to Liz Truss. But people always forget she was queen of all these other countries. I mean, when she died, she was queen of 14 countries. But during her lifetime, she waved goodbye to another, I think it's 18 or 19 countries. So if you list her tally of prime ministers, from Australia to Canada to New Zealand to wherever, It's hundreds of prime ministers. So you've got to delve into all that. So if any biographer could condense it down to one volume, I'd be amazed. I mean, you'd almost be looking at doing 2 or 3.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Now, you mentioned that Charles keeps a diary. Does William keep a diary?
I don't know about William. Charles, certainly, the king keeps a diary, and he I think follows pretty much the same sort of policy that the late Queen did, and she in turn followed the example of her father. And I did see his diaries. She let me see his diaries when I was writing my biography of her. And they were fascinating because he started writing a diary on the first day of the Second World War. And he wrote in it that I'm keeping this because your memory can play tricks, and it's really important to be able to know what you did on any given day in case sort of years to come people say, well, why did this happen? Why did that happen? And yes, of course, you've got officials who keep official records, but you want your own. And he didn't sort of fill it with sort of inner thoughts. It wasn't a sort of angst-ridden personal diary. It wasn't Bridget Jones. But there was a lot of sort of, had lunch with the Prime Minister, met General so-and-so, visited this regiment, all that. But in the mix, there are lines here and there about, what happened, or, had a lucky escape, nearly got killed today, bomb landed on the palace, this sort of, and then you read his sort of, there are moments in there that I think are very revealing, and I think that's certainly what I expect will be in the in Elizabeth II's diaries. And I know that we know funnily enough, we do have a very good idea of Prince Charles's diaries, as Prince Charles, that is, because he wrote them, and he gave his official biography. He had an official biography of him written in 1994. So I mean, 30 years ago. By Jonathan Dimbleby. Really good book. And in that's got lots of extracts from his diary. And he does write really, really entertaining diaries. I mean, there are a lot of wonderful kind of lines in there. He talks about sort of arriving in America and seeing the sort of huge media stand and all the flash guns going off at the same time. And he said it's like hearing an elephant sneezing, it's they were very readable. Unfortunately, they then bits of them then leaked out subsequently, and there were 1 or 2 disobliging remarks, notably about the Chinese leadership, and that got in the public domain, and that ended up in court. So I think after that, he decided to stop doing these diaries, and the diary he keeps now is Monarch, I'm told, and as I say in the book, they're more straightforward. They're sort of records with a few reflections. I mean, I'm sure they're very readable, but again, that's for many years hence.
The waiting.
The waiting.
Well, you wanted to know.
Kill me.
You wanted to know how soon a future monarch would have to start keeping.
Well, we know, though. I mean, we do know that the late Queen, as I say in the book, her last entry was about the arrangements for the Liz Truss Privy Council. So she was keeping that diary right up till the last week of her life, very dutifully logging it all down.
Gosh, as if Liz Truss made the cut with those moments. It's funny to think about now, isn't it?
But the last, I mean, I think it's rather nice that the last image that we will all have of Elizabeth II is that rather wonderful photograph of her standing in front of the fireplace at Balmoral, and she's got a big smile on her face. Because she's just done her duty. She's just appointed a new prime minister, and you could see her thinking, the country's back on its feet. I mean, she wasn't to know how that premiership was going to pan out, but that's really of no concern to her, because she doesn't do politics. She does governance.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the passing of time, the King is celebrating his birthday this week. I mean, it's a big moment for him in what's been a big year, but he does like to play these things down, doesn't he? He's very self-deprecating. I know he's sent a message to the Military Wives Choir, who recorded a song, I think it's called November Sunday, to celebrate his big day this year. And I'll just quote that he basically jokes about the fact that while those of us of a certain age may feel the need for any such birthday celebrations is in inverse proportion to our advancing years, I am nonetheless deeply touched by the wonderfully thoughtful note. Yeah.
How old is he turning at?
He's going to be 76.
76.
Yeah.
Okay.
76 years young.
Yeah.
But he's chosen to go and spend it highlighting one of his good causes.
Yeah, he's going to be looking at food and recycling. And it's interesting, when he became king, people would sort of say, well, how's he going to be able to carry on promoting all these causes when he has to be above politics? Well, you can. You just do things slightly differently. So he can't make speeches now on the environment. I mean, he can make fairly general speeches, as he did at the COP summit last year. But you can do a lot of show and a bit less tell. So that's why I think, he's using his birthday, knowing that there'll be media interest in his birthday. Are you going to be there? Have you got the details of what he's going to be doing?
We do know that he's opening 2 coronation food hubs. And this is the project that he launched around his coronation to basically distribute surplus food. So food that's going to waste from restaurants, grocers, whatever.
Festival.
It's a way of getting it out to the places where it's needed. So, as you say, it's right up his street. I'm sure there'll be a lot of organic food. A lot of being very frugal with leftovers.
Which we know he is. I mean, he does have some interesting eating habits. When I was writing the book, I discovered, well, I kind of always knew, but in rather more detail, his dislike of lunch. I mean, it really is, it's genuine. He thinks lunch is a sort of fairly pointless exercise, so he likes to sort of power on through the day.
Never disagreed with someone more.
Well, I think he has arguments with Queen Camilla about it, because she's actually patron of a charity called the Big Lunch.
It's awkward.
Whereas he's more sort of patron of a charity which doesn't exist, called the No Lunch. He's a strong believer in the power of tea time, so he likes to get through to well, exactly. We're all having a cup of tea. But he likes his tea, and he likes a sort of sandwich and a slice of cake at about 4:00. But nothing in the middle of the day. Although, since this has been one of the interesting byproducts of this year, is that, as I discovered, that he has actually now started eating lunch. There's someone around him said, it's not what you or I would consider lunch, but it's a sort of something small and eggy in the middle of the day. I think it's largely at the behest of Queen Camilla, who's very much keeping him in check, making sure he does the right things. And I think there's a view his doctors have that, you do need to have a bit of sustenance in the middle of the day.
Quite right too.
There are there are more details, obviously, that people should get the book and should read. But have you left something out that maybe,
I don't know. I was just enjoying my right royal tea.
Nicely swerved, Robert. Yeah.
No. There are a few things that I couldn't get to the bottom of, or I mean, there are always things that you.
Maybe we can help you. Yes.
Well, you never really finish a book. You just stop messing around and tinkering with it.
Yeah.
And then you print it. So I don't know. Hopefully there'll be another edition, and there'll be more new and exciting things in that one too.
Oh, I can't wait,
Robert. As always, I could talk to you all day and all the next day. Thank you so much for joining us. There are so many fantastic nuggets in the book. So do go out and grab an updated copy, and we'd love to have you back.
Always happy to be here. Have another Right Royal podcast tea.
Yeah,
and it's great. It's lovely chatting to you all, and thank you for going to the trouble of reading it.
It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. So that's everything from us today. Before we sign off, we have a little Easter egg for you. If you would like to experience the podcast without ads, simply head over to our Royal Club on Substack and sign up. Look for the details in the description, or if you're watching on YouTube, just click here.
And with that, thank you so much to Danielle and Robert, and to you two for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. And in the meantime, catch more from Hello with our news and entertainment show, The Daily Lowdown, available on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts.
Bye.